Number one on why music executives cringe when artists do this. When artists make requests too soon, it can lead to really bad outcomes. So, what I mean by this is, for example, when an artist doesn't have a fan following, right? And I've had artists who maybe don't even have a social media presence yet. So, when it comes to having a social media presence, it doesn't mean that you have to have every single social media platform set up and to have millions of followers, but you need to have something that represents you as an artist in some kind of fashion, because right now we don't really have business cards anymore, right? The first place, including myself, when someone says, hey, will you help me with this or will you represent me on that? The first thing that I'm typically going to do is look on social media and just kind of check it out, because that's the business card. What is this artist doing? Have they released music? Are they performing? What kind of fan following do they have? And that's all the information that I need to know. But more importantly, that all the other music business executives are going to want to know and what they're going to be doing. Okay. So if you have absolutely no fan following, that's not good. And you need to be aware of that before you put out that request and you say, hey, look at my thing to see if you want to work with me. Because quite frankly, you're not selling yourself very well if you have nothing to sell. So, number one, if you have no fan following, keep that in mind. If you haven't built up your social media presence, keep that in mind. But then also, I've had people who submit music to executives, but it's like a demo. So it's kind of one or two things. You have something that's not really an official release yet. So maybe you've done a soft release and it's just something you've posted on SoundCloud, or it's just posted on YouTube, but you haven't actually distributed it to the music platforms, right? Which is okay. That's totally fine. We've had songs that go viral just because they were posted on TikTok. But if you have no music whatsoever, again, it goes to, for someone to meaningfully be able to check you out and to see what you do, what's your sound, what's your style, what's your brand, you need to have something to actually represent yourself with. Okay. But then in the same vein, you need to kind of have your thing defined, right? What kind of artist or musician are you? What's your branding? What's your look? And you don't have to have this all worked out and perfectly packaged, right? But the more of this that you can have done, the better off, again, you're going to come off. It's the sales pitch we're thinking about. Okay. So when you reach out to someone for help because you want to get managed, you want to get an agent, you want to get signed to a record label, you are in fact saying, hey, this is the moment I'm making that request. So you're going to look at all my stuff. So think about that. What is it that they're going to see, from the music to the branding to the social media? Okay. So again, number one, when it comes to why music executives are cringing, artists are making their requests too soon. Okay, so don't do that. Number two, when it comes to why music executives are cringing, low quality music. Bedroom producers and artists shouldn't sound like bedroom producers and artists, right? So Billie Eilish's brother, when it comes to, I think even just their first record, like everything has been produced in their bedrooms and on laptops, and that's okay. It doesn't sound like a bedroom production. And quite frankly, a lot of producers now work on their productions on tour buses, on their computers. That's all fine. It's kind of almost DIY these days. But if your music is so low quality that it doesn't actually represent you very well, you got to keep that in mind. Now, obviously, there's a caveat, right? So you might be, someone who actually does low quality sound, and that's your thing, right? There are genres of music that kind of work in the bad sound, so to speak, right? The distortion. But for the majority of everyone else, right? So if you're into rock music or pop music, you want to have something that at least represents you okay. Case in point, when I was, in college, I was kind of working on my first album, and, not that I knew production, but I had no connections. I didn't have anyone that could help me. I didn't know what to do. And so I, as part of my honors thesis, learned production, and I produced my first album. It wasn't necessarily the most amazing sounding thing, but it became kind of this glorified demo to represent the sound that I wanted, what my voice sounded like, what my style was, what I wanted to talk about. And so then I was able to use that to springboard to get, collaborations and to continue getting better and working with better producers. And so, depending on what you're trying to do, keep that in mind and don't make the mistake of having such low quality music that it really represents you in a bad light. Because again, with a lot of these music executives, you got one shot. And so don't blow it. Number 3, when it comes to why music executives cringe, artists are just demanding without doing any research or legwork. Okay, don't be that person if you're an artist, producer, musician, that you reach out to someone, like let's say a manager, and you say, hey, I want you to manage me. And in your email, you don't even call them by their first name. You don't even say, I'm familiar with you doing this, right? Because maybe you looked up a little information. I see you manage these other artists. Like, you put in zero effort to your communication. That comes across almost in an insulting kind of way, okay? So you have to try to personalize your email. And this goes not just for, people you're reaching out to when it comes to like management and trying to get signed by a record label, but when you're trying to do things in a business fashion, like getting your, music placed in TV and film. So you're talking to a music supervisor and you know nothing about the kind of music they typically represent. You don't know their first name. You spell their first name wrong. Personally, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, right? So if someone's sending me an email and like in the email, it says my name and they still misspell my name, it's just kind of like that person seems to just not be paying attention to details. And if you annoy someone right out the gate and all the email is to make a request, you got to think about these things, okay? And then, things like if you just say, hey, check out my music, and you send a Dropbox link that has like 100 songs, what's the expectation there? Is the expectation that the person who receives it like, oh my gosh, yes, my afternoon is saved. Now I can spend 2 hours listening to all these demos. No. And then, sometimes you guys will send WAV files, right? So they're going to be super high resolution, big files, and sometimes Dropbox won't even play them in a browser. So then it's going to say you have to download the song. And so as someone on the other end of that, they might say, I'm not going to download this virus-filled, or WAV file. So think about all these things and respect the person's time. Understand that the person who's receiving your email is probably super busy. And you're coming out of left field and you're making some kind of request. You might be the best thing since sliced bread. But you got to be like, hey, here's a quick synopsis. I've done a little research about you. Spelled your name right. Here's a little, synopsis of what I'm looking for. Here's a quick link of like one thing that you can look at. And then I would love to talk to you about this further if you have time. If not, thank you so much for your time looking at this email. Okay, comes off respectful, comes off professional, comes off like the kind of person the person you're talking to might want to work with. Okay? And then, guys, look, one of the best rules of thumb is to also, don't be so eager that you're just asking and sending out tons of emails and begging. Like, don't do it. If you're not ready, you're not ready. All right. So, sometimes the music just simply isn't up to par yet. And it might be premature for you to be like reaching out to the labels, like, please sign me, please sign me. You might not be there yet. And in fact, if you aren't in a negotiation place, because you actually have a following, you have stuff happening, they're going to totally take advantage of you. They're going to smell the desperation. They'll be like, sure, I'll sign you for like 8 albums with a ton of options. I'm going to own your life and your trademark and your name and your children, and you're going to sign that contract because you have zero negotiation power because you have nothing. So you got to put in the effort and the work to actually build yourself up. Right? So now if you have like 100,000 followers because you've put in a ton of effort to learn about your audience and to connect with people, and not even that much, right? So you might have like 20,000 followers. You have, a good amount of monthly listeners on music platforms. Like, these are all things that now makes you a way more attractive artist for any of these music executives to want to work with. And then, even in the same spirit of, I talked about contracts and getting screwed. I mean, have an attorney. Right? If you don't have an attorney on your side, either way, they're going to try to take advantage of you. But even more so if you are desperate. I had a client I was talking to today, and I got to tell you, this is my favorite type of client to have when I'm negotiating, because the client says, I don't care if they don't want to take my terms, I'll walk away from the deal. Like, that's it. And so that gives me so much negotiation power, because now we're not worried about it. We're not desperate for the offer. So just things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to things that totally turn music executives off and make them cringe. Okay? And you got to let them sometimes come to you. I think some of the best managers, some of the best agents, some of the best record labels will seek you out because they'll be like, oh my gosh, did you hear about so-and-so? And they want you. And so that means you have to be patient, but the more that you're building, the more that you're getting your social media and your audience and you're going live and you're releasing music, everything else is going to get so much easier for you. So don't worry so much about what's going on elsewhere. But if you are going to reach out to people, please keep these 5 things, or not 5, I've talked about more than 5 things, but what we discussed, keep all of that in mind. And then, of course, you can check out how to keep your dukes up in the music business when it comes to just generally how to stay legally protected, how to be smart in this industry, how to make money. I got you covered on all of it. And of course, those free contract templates come with the book.